Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here with you again this year to share Thanksgiving Day with you. I think the relationships between Ireland and the United States don't need to be stressed. We all know how close the friendships are, both at a political level and at a social level. Sometimes the sentiment is so strong you can almost touch it. And we experienced that again this year, I think, with the celebration of John F. Kennedy's visit to Ireland 50 years ago, and then the movement from ecstasy to agony when we marked his assassination in Dallas. It's great to be meeting on a day like this to give thanks. And we have a lot to be thankful for this year in this country. And as we celebrate and give thanks, I think it's worth noting again that in the last 12 months since I spoke to you here last year, 66 new companies have been set up in Ireland, the benefit of foreign direct investment, the bulk of them from the United States. This joins the 1,000 companies that are here already, again with a very large percentage of them from the United States. The economy is in its third year of growth. Our model, as you all know very well from your own businesses, is to grow through exports. Export-led growth is the model, and exports have rebounded again. This year we expect to export in value terms 177 billion euros worth of exports, which is an enormous achievement. It's bigger than our GDP. And when you think of the small country we are with a small population, this is amazing. We ran balance of payments deficits for many years. We're running surpluses now for the last 3 years. And I think there's something worth marking. The CSO are calculating balance of payments surpluses and deficits since 1981. And in the last quarter of this year, in the second quarter of this year, there was a surplus of 2.9 billion. That's the biggest quarterly surplus since figures were recorded in 1981. So again, the evidence is there of a growing economy and an economy that's getting out of the doldrums and underpinning the kind of lifestyle which we hope for our people. Property prices are going up, retail sales are on the up, tax takes for the first 10 months of the year is slightly ahead of target, spending for the first 10 months of the year is significantly below target, and we're now creating 1,200 jobs a week net in this economy. 58,000 jobs in the 12 months from September to September. So it's not just a kind of a good news blip. The trend in job creation has been strengthening for 15 months now, and we don't see any obstacle at present to the trend continuing. People look at their live register quite a lot, but of course it's not an exact measure of the number of people who are unemployed or the number of people who are at work. But if you look at employment figures, we're moving into a situation, if we can maintain the trend of 50,000 jobs a year, by the time this government finishes its mandate, 2 million people will be at work in Ireland. And I remember when I was Minister for Justice back in the 1980s, the nadir of that particular recessionary period, the number at work in Ireland went below 960,000. We dipped well below the million. So we're again within striking distance of the 2 million figure, and I think the trend is going to continue. The last time that we had job creation of this magnitude was in that period which spans John Bruton's government to Bertie Ahern's first government, from about 94 to just short of 2000, just short of the millennium. And in that period, we were doing about 1,500 jobs a week. And it made a huge change in the labour market. Then the model changed and it all went wrong. So we're not wandering in the fog when we're looking for policies. If we could take the key elements of the policies as we are doing, which pertained from the middle 90s to the late 90s, and you have a very competitive economy, drive cost out of the economy, invest in education and skills, keep driving the export initiative. Well, there's no magic about it. It was done before and it can be done again. But this time we want to make sure that we sustain it, because I've been in politics a long time and quite frankly I'm sick of boom and bust models. I'd rather grow at lower rates in a sustained way rather than be taking people through booms and bust sequences every 10 or 12 years. So that's where we're headed for. But as I say, on Thanksgiving Day, we have a lot to be thankful for, and we give thanks. And we give thanks to all those Irish people who made so many sacrifices in their personal lives and in their family lives to sort out the nation's finances again and to position the economy so that it can grow as it is growing now. We celebrate as well the fact that we're exiting from the bailout, and we celebrate the fact that when we decided to exit without any precautionary program externally, even though we have significant cash buffers, that the markets didn't move. And our bonds and the 10-year bond in the secondary market is still around 350 as it was before we made the decision. And the rating agencies didn't get excited either. And in our conversations with them, they're strongly in favour of what we're doing, and I would hope that that will be reflected in their ratings as we move through next year. So again, a lot to be thankful for, and as I say, I'd like to thank you, your companies, and this organisation, the American Chamber, for the very strong part you have played in growing our economy, particularly in the area of foreign direct investment. Your President, Mr. Keegan, talked about the changes that I'm making in the R&D tax credit. The finance bill is going through the Dáil at present. We're at committee stage, but the changes are based on a review which was conducted last year of the R&D tax credit. Your organisation made a submission to us, and we took it very seriously because you have the detailed knowledge rather than the theoretic knowledge that many other people have. So we're doing three things. We're phasing out the base year entirely, and I'll do that as quickly as I can, and I would hope to have very significant progress made in that in the next 2 years. We're lifting the cap on outsourcing from 10% to 15%. That's being done in this finance bill. And as well as that, we found that there were, in practice, barriers to special employees availing of the transfer of the tax credit to them. So I'm removing a series of those barriers, and it has support right across the political system, so there'll be no difficulty in enacting this. The second area you referred to, Mr. Keegan, is the issue of corporation tax. Now, corporation tax has been the subject of public and political debate for as long as I'm in politics. But on this occasion, it seems to me that changes will take place, because there's political will now to make changes. And there's a drive from electorates right across the developed countries to make those changes. The G20 had a very interesting meeting, and they're pledged very strongly, and they mandated the OECD to move and make changes. So we'll participate in all the OECD discussions, and we will move in tandem with international opinion. Most of what needs to be changed will be subject to international agreement. There isn't a lot that we can do unilaterally, but there is one thing, and it's what we're changing in the finance bill, and that's the issue of stateless companies. You see, all companies, as you know, are taxed in Ireland at 12.5% on the profits they make in Ireland. But a tax planning practice into the system where one could incorporate a company in Ireland, transfer profits that were made elsewhere through that company to a jurisdiction where no tax is paid. And as a result of this kind of stateless company, once it passed through the company in Ireland, you had a situation where companies' profits were subject to tax nowhere. And it was no advantage to us because we got no revenue out of it as a country. And the same companies pay full tax on the profits they generate in Ireland. So because the solution to that problem was in our own hands, and because we had taken pretty heavy reputational damage in the course of the hearings in Congress, I decided, because the solution was in our own hands, to amend that. And we did it, of course, in full consultation with the companies. So the rules have changed with effect from the day the finance bill was published in respect of new companies. But there's a phase-in period of 15 months for companies who had their tax planning dependent on this arrangement. And they do not have to move to the new system until 1st of January 2015. On the wider issue, we're absolutely pledged to the 12.5% corporate tax rate, and there will be no movement from that. In the European treaties, the setting of tax rates, whether corporate or personal or anything else, are a matter for sovereign governments. They're not a matter for decision at Euro level. They're not a matter for the Commission. They're not a matter for the Council of Ministers. So we can't be forced into changing. We have a legal entitlement to set our own rates. We've made that very clear, and I've made it clear on several occasions at ECOFIN meetings, and we are going to stay with the 12.5% rate. It's what suits us. There's less pressure now than there was on the rate because the movement on corporation tax internationally is downward anyway. And we see our friends in the UK increasingly becoming our lead competitors for foreign direct investment and a general movement of going down in tax. On the base erosion and transfer of profits and all that agenda which the OECD are conducting, my officials are playing a full part in the discussions at committee level within the OECD. And that agenda is being driven very hard now by the tax people at OECD in Paris. They were with us a couple of weeks ago. They're planning to have a blueprint published by next September. And I don't think it'll be, more talk and theory as has been for many years, because the political muscle of the G20 is now underpinning the move. I think change will follow. But as the President advised, it's my fullest intention not to make any more unilateral changes. Anyway, change depends on international arrangements rather than domestic arrangements. So we will not move unilaterally, but we will move in tandem with the new agreements which I believe will emerge from the OECD consideration of these matters. The exchange of information is very important and on tax, and the Global Forum on Exchange of Tax Information ruled that Ireland was one of only 18 countries that fully comply with their rules on the exchange of information. So we can hold our heads high. We're not a tax haven. We have very transparent systems. We're respected internationally, and we will play our part in any change that occurs in corporation tax rate. We don't see ourselves as part of the problem. We see ourselves as contributing to the solution, and that's what we will do. And I'm glad it was raised here by your President, because obviously it's a very, very important item, and it's part of the building blocks of our strategy to attract foreign direct investment, and consequently part of the building blocks of our strategy to grow the economy through exports from that sector of the economy. So a lot has happened, and we're not exuberant, or we're not going to be marching behind brass bands down the street when we exit from the bailout on the 15th of December. But we have come a certain distance successfully. And, all those people who told us it couldn't be done, well, I get a kind of a secret satisfaction that it is done. And all those celebrities who seem to have bed and breakfast on Monroe's, all those guys who told me I'd have to default, and all those people who said we'd never create a job again in this country. There are difficulties ahead, but they're being resolved, and they're being resolved slowly. There's no reluctance in the government to continue with what has to be done. There's no reluctance in either party in government to continue with what has to be done. But the next phase now is that once the bailout is over, and you know the way it worked, you had to fulfill certain conditions every quarter. And when you fill the conditions, the trike came, and if you had fulfilled the conditions, you were allowed to draw more money down from our lenders of last resort. That phase is over now. So we have to work to our own plans to a large extent. And we will be not really subject to any more scrutiny than any of the other European countries or Eurozone countries. While we were busily following our programme, the fiscal rules have changed dramatically in Europe. And I was at a meeting last week in Brussels on Friday, and we were looking at the budgets of the non-programme countries. And every budget had to be examined centrally by a kind of a peer group review under the advice of the IMF, the Commission and the Bank. And of the 13 countries reviewed, only 2 were automatically considered to have complied with all the new fiscal regulations. So, quietly as the euro moved on, we have gone from a situation where we have a common currency, which is now in 18 member states. We have a fiscal union where the budgetary rules are now centralised and have to be complied with for all members of the Eurozone, regardless of their economic strength or weakness. And we're in the final months of agreement on a full banking union. So the integration of Europe economically and financially is proceeding apace. And, if you look over the 3-year period, huge progress in that direction has been made. So what we're doing now is we're developing a kind of a short statement of intent where we're laying down the main lines of policy which we will follow as a government. And we'll publish that around the same time as the exit from the bailout on the 15th of December. And having set down the framework then, we will ask all government departments and agencies to review their strategy statements and fill in the individual policies across all government departments. Because the risk that I would see is that having been guided in detail for so long on the economic and financial approach we should follow, in the absence of that guidance, there was a risk that things would go off the rails again. That's not going to happen. We're going to set down our own plan, which will be followed systematically for the next number of years. I suppose the test of success in the end of the day is, can we get all the people who want to work in the country, can we get them decent jobs that are reasonably well paid to underpin the kind of lifestyle which they aspire to? And we're well on the road to do that, but we will continue resolutely to fulfill our commitments and our obligations. So, happy Thanksgiving Day, and every success for the next 12 months. Thank you very much.